What's up, world? This is Coach Crew with the LFS-Kali Fight Team. I'm doing another episode of 2 FMA-Nerds talk about stuff. So, today I'm bringing on my good friend, Chris Chiu from the Arnis International lineage. He's been on technically twice, but reality is once because we did a Carpool Kali episode with him, but really we had some technical issues, so I streamed it through that. But anyways, so I'm going to bring him on, and yeah, let's get this shit started. What's up, Chris?
Hello, everyone.
You look all comfy there. We can fix the angle.
I did. I'll get a little like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could do this on the couch like we have been like that. I mean, you're all comfy like. So,
this is the closest thing I have to an office right now, so.
Hey, whatever works, dude. So what's been going on with you here recently?
The funny thing is I just literally came back from a gathering of FMA. So last week, I'll go chronologically. Last week we did a fun Taste of South Florida FMA event, or Taste of FMA South Florida, hosted by the June and Paul Show. We had Arnis International, not Arnis, me. We had some, Bandio Bayet was there, so Gary Montarnis was there. Pam Juan Arnis under Chris and another man whose name escapes me right now. I just met them for the first time. Grandmaster Chad Bailey, Progressive Arnis, Grandmaster Bram of his stuff, CSSD. We had June and Paul, June of Balintawak Quintada, Paul of Hirosa de Cuerdas, Zach of Libre Fighting Systems. And if I'm forgetting any, I apologize, but that was a fun time. It was just a fun event of community and training and learning and growing.
Dude, that's...
And then today...
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, please speak. I spoke too much.
No, I was just like, that is quite the luminary list. So, like, what was going on today?
Today was FCS Kali's winter gathering. It started on Thursday, and I couldn't go to Thursday or Friday, so I went Saturday and today. Today was the last day, and just hanging out with Suhan Ray and a lot of the other Monongs and Gurus that were there. Ray's like an uncle of mine, so it's always a blast hanging with those guys.
Oh, nice. Sounds like a busy week. So it seems like here recently that there's been a whole bunch of like just large gatherings, which is really cool for the community in general, because I mean, we've talked about this and a number of other podcasts have talked about this, is the increase in prominence and visibility of FMA and the unity that comes from by creating these multi-tribal gatherings.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely excuse me, no, I left the FCS gathering while we were eating dinner, so I slammed a burger that was just cooked on the grill by Google Bryce on the way down. So acid reflux is hitting me now, but it's okay. I got my liquid death here to keep me, keep me cold and warm. Oh, before we get further, I'll talk about that. But how cold is it in Alaska right now?
So, funny story. Watching Guru Turu on Belts and Lubis do a video and like screenshot of his temperature because he was going to a workshop in the somewhere inside of Washington, and he had put like -9. I did a little screenshot, and it was like 30 degrees. So,
so Alaska's not the coldest place in America right now?
No, I live on the ocean. I live like right on the coast. So we have a lot of the sea breeze stuff that helps keep it temperate. Now, bear in mind, where I live in Alaska is very different than like say Fairbanks, which is -40. But at that point, it's kind of warm because there's no wind chill. I'm consistently talking to my parents about this because they live in the Midwest right now. And like I keep telling them like Alaska's not that cold. Because, like, in the Midwest, you have wind chill, and the snow comes sideways, and it's trying to kill you. I don't have that problem.
Wind chill is the worst thing on the planet.
Especially with humidity. Ugh, it's awful.
Wind chill is proof that Satan is on Earth and God was mad at us.
Yep, I can agree with that one. So, yeah.
I woke up, and I live in sunny Orlando, Florida, the Sunshine State. I woke up, and it was 39 degrees.
That's crazy.
I hated it. Everything.
Well, I mean, I keep saying Alaska's really not as cold as people think it is. So it's one of the best kept secrets.
Of Alaska are not as cold as you think.
Yeah.
I've been to Barrow. It's freezing up in Barrow.
Yeah, because it's way the fuck up north. So
exactly.
Yeah. Oh well. Anyways, so
Back to the FMA exposure, which I think is such an amazing thing that we're seeing this. And Florida, I feel like, is always, and Tuhon Ray and I were talking about this weekend, actually. Like, there is such a hotbed of FMA, especially down south in Florida. And my dad, I remember him telling me years ago, like, why there's so much here is because a lot of the old GMs, like Remy especially, loved Florida because it felt like the Philippines. It was hot, muggy, and humid.
yeah, yeah,
It just felt like the Philippines for them. Only difference is there's Disney World here.
yeah.
Um, I know that there's a huge, and I think we talked about this once before. Like, there's three main hubs of FMA, or I might have talked about this with you or Jesse as well. Jesse Santiago at FMA Pulse.
Yeah.
California, New York, and Florida are really the three like major FMA spots. Not discrediting anyone else who does FMA in the Midwest or in the Northeast.
Seattle
Northwest,
area is huge.
Seattle's growing big. That's good.
Yeah.
Because I know for a while, like Stockton kind of had the West Coast in its grasp,
Mhm.
and like we have Florida, Georgia's getting some leeway now. I know we got a couple groups up there. I know some other guys have groups up there.
Mhm.
The Carolinas, obviously, GM Bobby lives in North Carolina, so. What's up, Danny?
What's up, Coach Danny?
New York is obviously New York, so you got a bunch of different groups up there.
Mhm.
And Canada's getting some people too.
Yeah, that's so I proposed a question in FMA discussion a while back, but it was like one of my mini carenzas of like last carenza before winter hit, and I proposed the question of like, so Filipinos, how do you end up in cold climates? Because for one, I mean, there's a ton of Filipinos here in Alaska, mainly because the canneries and the military base, but like Canada, like Toronto area where Paulo and Justin and all those guys and Joe Apostol, I mean, they're all in that area. So I'm curious, how do Filipinos end up in Canada of all places?
Well, I mean, I personally don't know. Like, I have no friends that are Filipino in Canada. The ones that I know in Canada are non-Pinoy. Obviously, there are Paulos in Canada, but I don't know him personally very well.
Yeah.
My buddy Peter is an FQI in Balintawak, and he's in Toronto.
Mhm.
And I was talking to one of the guys from FCS-Kali today. His name is John. He's in Ontario.
Yep.
Or Ottawa. So,
Yep.
I mean, I don't know how much Pinoy presence is in Canada, but there's definitely Pinoy influence in Canada. So, and I think that's just what's so cool to me is that, and obviously, you know, you guys had me by some years, but I've been getting to watch this growth of FMA to where, I mean, my dad was telling me back in the day, Chris, there weren't these big things. There weren't these giant gatherings of the tribes.
Nope.
Everyone was so, it's mine and nothing else, and this tribalistic mentality where it's this system and only this system versus, like, again, like last week, I cannot stress enough how great it was to be surrounded by so many different arts.
Yep.
June and Paul do an amazing job with that. In a couple of weeks, I'll be at GM Chad Bailey's winter camp, which every year is one of my camps that I look forward to because last year we had Stockton multi-style, we had Modern Arnis, my dad, we had Combatan, we had Carlos Ilustrissimo, we had Dean Franco there with some of his KI influence. Brian was there with his stuff. We just had we had a Dog Brothers guy and from my buddy Ryan Thomas, and he did Krabi Cabrón, or I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure. But we had so much influences from the Filipino arts coming together and not trying to big dog anybody, but just share, which is such a beautiful thing to see, especially because, from what my dad and Ray and Bram and those guys say, that was not the case 30 years ago. It just wasn't.
And I think, so going back a little bit before continuing this thought, every show, me included, we've talked ad nauseum about the politics of FMA and the great drama of tribalism. That is my goal, not to talk about this show other than just that disclaimer. I want to talk about the celebration of unity, because the fact is, the more we talk about the unity, the less likely we're going to continue to give prominence and bring up the issue of politics, because the fact is we just got to let it rest and move together. So
Are you saying you don't want to shit talk it all night?
no, not tonight. There's going to be some of it at some point, but the fact is, um, I find, and we've gone on this point before, many other podcasts, is that it's through the digital space is that FMA is getting its prominence in interconnectivity. Uh, Look at the silver lining of the pandemic is that people came together in a digital space. So if we can continue that momentum, I think that's how we can grow and unify because everybody's sharing out as to what they're doing and everybody's like having a view of what everybody's doing. And that's really healthy. So, and more that we continue with that online dialogue, meeting into physical meetups and gatherings. This is how we just elevate from the other topic into something better and beautiful.
I completely agree. I mean, it's. Who was I talking to recently about this similar the aspect of? I had a buddy of mine who was another FMA practitioner. We were just talking about politics and just the landscape of FMA as a whole, and looking at all the quote unquote drama that exists in the FMA community, and like from these older masters and the old guard, as you call them, which I think is a great word for it. And I told him, I was like, look, dude, first off, a lot of these fights ain't ours. You know, and respectfully, it's not our business to tell them to stop fighting because it's their business, it's their situation. But now what I like what he's saying is like, yeah, just because it's their fight doesn't mean we have to carry it. I'm like, exactly. You know, I don't want these old masters to die horrifically or to die of anything more than old age or to die in combat like warriors like they want to. But when they're gone, their beefs are gone too. We don't need to carry their beefs on after they're gone, which is where I think that, you know, I heard this in a karate movie once, like the wishes of the sensei need to carry on past his lifetime. I'm like, to a degree. To a degree, I agree with that. But if there's a blood feud between one clan and another clan, when both heads of the clan die, and they're the only ones who knew what the beef was about, there's no point in keeping the beef. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if the blood feud is literally by blood and you're adopted into the clan, is it really your problem? Unless you make it your problem. Because really what this is a conversation about generational trauma and dealing with the sins of the father or sins of the forefathers. And like we can either stop it and move forward in positivity and beauty, or we can continue staying in the mud and just not experience that post-traumatic growth, because that's the victim mindset of just continuing to perpetuate the bullshit of what came before. Because so looking at this in a very practical sense, if we keep fighting, I hate going into this topic, but keep fighting, nobody's going to like enter into it. Nobody's going to join in because they're going to look at there's so much contention and conflict. I don't want to be part of that mess. I want to be around those who are going to be uplifting and positive and do this for the love of it, because that's post growth. That's post traumatic growth. That's a growth mindset. So I don't know.
And I think that, you know, I'm going to give a shout out here to Grandmaster Brian Zielinski, the creator and the host of the Modern Race Legacy Camp that's done every 2 years. This past year, we had, forgive me, my dad, Bram, Brian, Dan and Chad, Ray, Michael Bates, Janet, Tom Bolton, and I'm so sorry. I know I'm missing Roland Rivera. I know I'm missing another two, I think. Anyway, that's like roughly 12 OGs. All who were, I'm just going to stick in the modern race one just because it makes this example easier to understand. Roughly 12 to 13. Oh, and Dieter Canoodle. Datu Dieter. I'm so sorry, Datu.
Yeah.
He's going to hit me for that or something. But how could I forget Dieter of all people? Roughly 13 to 15 OGs who were all differently affected by the death of the GM, Professor M, who 20 years ago, there was probably some beefs among, there's no one, you have 13 people of that caliber in the same room that there wasn't a beef at one point between one or two of them. I mean, it's especially back in the old days. But every one of them put their beef aside, put their ego aside, put their whatever aside, because they all knew that the real reason they were all together in the first place is to honor the man who is no longer here.
Yep. Joined in love because we love the man, love what he gave us. Join in brotherhood and love. That's a beautiful why we fight.
And that's where I think that Brian Zelensky is doing an incredible job of, at least in the modern Arnis world, like creating that community aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because when I talked to my dad years ago when I was first learning about Remy and the situation of it all, he didn't want to deal with anybody after Remy died. I mean, he lost like his surrogate father figure.
Mm-hmm.
Remy was like his dad. I mean, my mother, who they're no longer together, haven't been together in 20 years, would say, Chris, your dad loved Remy.
Mm-hmm.
If Remy called at 3 in the morning, your father would go.
Yeah.
And when Remy died, it changed him.
Yep. I mean,
never go be with other people and train.
I mean, it's that the impact of somebody who brought something so beautiful to the community and to the world, quite honestly, that impact can be it should be a positive thing, but it can be a contentious thing. But like rolling it back, the fact is they brought us together. So why not carry that tradition of unity? And I think that is what we should do. People can argue whatever, but the fact is, join in the love of the thing. So, like, point case, I had Guru Jeff Soriano on here last time.
I got to meet Guru Jeff.
Yeah, he's cool. Him and Guru John are phenomenal people, as is the rest of the Balloon to Walk community. But with that, talk about the Balloon to Walk community. Yeah. Well, but the Balloon to Walk community, the again, leadership starts and ends at the top because of the tonality, the intent, and just the policies in place by the head of any organization determines the actions, the culture, and everything that falls underneath them. Because as a head of an organization, you could say kick rocks or hang on or hang out. And the culture, if it's supportive of all that, will support those standards and those policies. And so the cool thing, talking with Grow Jeff, is that fact that we have so many people that are cross-training in Balloon to Walk. And they're so inviting and welcome of each other. And I find that with like modern Arnis, it's the same space, and it can be. And this is where it's the fact of it's FMA, and we love FMA, so why not do it all?
I agree completely. I mean, and this is, I was talking about that with FCS camp today, like we were talking about, because one of the guys there does Balloon to Walk, and he had no idea that there was so much cross training being done. And I was like, dude, like, in G and Bobby's latest book, Volume 2, he had all of his FQIs demonstrate one of their techniques for the book and do it in picture format. And not only that, they listed the influence in their technique.
Mm-hmm.
A number of them said modern Arnis, along with their Balloon to Walk. A number of them said every other art that existed, but it's just like, there is such a cross-training element that is so important to the growth and evolution of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
In modern Arnis case, I know this is true for 90% of the modern Arnis people encourage cross-training religiously. Like, it's important.
Yeah.
It needs to be done. I mean, so many of them, modern Arnis is their staple, and they just added to it. Other guys, like my dad's case, he did Kung Fu first, and then did modern Arnis. His modern Arnis made his Kung Fu better, and vice versa. It is you can't have one without the no. What I mean to say is this, and I guess I said this in a video I made a little while ago, where is your system unique?
Mm-hmm.
Culturally, geographically, historically, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But the human body, and you know this as a boxing coach, as a fighting coach, the human body is only a finite number of movements. Especially when we add a knife or a stick or whatever. There's either a forehand, a backhand, or a poke. Everything else is just a variation of that.
Yeah.
If it's this way, it's still a forehand, a backhand, or a poke.
Mm-hmm.
It's a low feet. It's still a low line forehand, backhand, or poke.
Mm-hmm.
In boxing, there's only what, two types of punches: a
Straight and
jab
round.
or a hook.
Yeah, straight and round.
Straight and round, yeah, because a cross is still just another straight.
Uppercut is a round. Over the top is a round.
There you go.
So,
There's only, and in kicking, there's a front kick, a side kick, and a round kick.
mm-hmm.
Everything else, a hook kick is basically a bent side leg kick, a side kick. A twist kick is just an awkward front kick, but
It's really just levers and rotation is what we're describing.
Wally J said this to my dad: "There's only so many ways to hit a person."
Yep.
And it's just it is what it is. Like, I find it hard to believe when people say things like, "Oh, you can only do one system and that's it." No, that's not true.
That's very boring.
And no system has all the answers. I don't care. And I've seen some Filipino systems claim to have everything covered, from ground fighting to weapons to shooting. And I went, well, hold on now. Considering guns weren't in the Philippines until very late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, there was a form of firearms when the Spaniards showed up by way of the Chinese, but like in the modern sense, yeah.
There were no tactical gun disarms in Filipino martial arts.
No.
40 years ago.
No.
Anyone who says differently is full of crap. Like, if you are sitting there at a Filipino seminar and the guy's like, "Oh, that's a tactical gun defense where you strip it, you take the slide off, and you boom." There was no way that Tepang Ilustrisimo was doing slide releases back in when he was making Carlos Ilustrisimo.
Well, I mean, let's look at the history of firearms manufacturing and technology development. Slide-based semi-automatic weapons are relatively new in the scope of firearms.
They're barely 100 years old, I think. Not even.
Yep.
No, because the first one was 18.
It's like 1890. Yeah.
1899. It was like the original semi-automatic handgun.
Yep.
So
somebody can Google it and correct us, but still, it's less than 100 years old. Yeah. But the thing that I look at, and this is both good and bad, FMA is the duct tape of martial arts. This is a radical idea. This is a contentious idea, but depending on how you look at it, FMA is the duct tape of the martial arts world. Reasons why, and I say this lovingly, who likes to, as Brown Man, who says, I'm going to Brown Man engineer stuff. FMA can be the duct tape of the martial arts world because we can plug and play and bring stuff together and link systems because it's human movement, principles, and whatnot. And just because the diversity of approach to combat, FMA is like duct tape. It connects stuff. Now, caveat to that, where it is the problematic issue about it's the duct tape, is they think they can just throw FMA on top of all of it and it's automatically going to work. So
yeah,
I could be wrong, but that's like how I view often what FMA is when people say that we have this, that, and the other in it, and it doesn't make sense because they're trying to, one, express to a larger market. And so they're going to say that they have everything. They're like the jack of all trades, but master of none. So that means they're mediocre at many things. And so duct tape, yeah, it works great for what it's going to do, but it's only a short window of what it can do. And you start seeing it failing as you use it over and over and over. So without building those proper connections. And so I don't know. FMA is duct tape. That'll be the soundbite for this.
That's the title of the episode. FMA is duct tape? ?
Yeah. Is it FMA? Is it duct tape?
Oh well. YouTube loves prognostication. It has to be a question mark.
Oh man.
I think that when people ask me like what FMA can do for them or what does it do as an art, which I'm gonna tie it back into what you said with this statement here, I harken back to what Remy told my dad. Well, my dad told me. FMA is an ice cream, and it just has a different flavor.
Yep.
So I broadened it to everyone has a martial art. You just add some more toppings onto the ice cream. You have your foundation, like in my case, and this is what my instructor guru Ben was talking to me about today at FCS-Kali. He's my personal FCS instructor. He's like, Chris, your foundation is modern Arnis.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful, it's great. You then practice Sarada, you practice FCS, you
Mm-hmm.
practice Balintalak, you practice Kumbatan, whatever. Everything goes back to your base, your foundation. My small circle jiu-jitsu, I learned that, I bring it back to my foundation. My taekwondo, I've applied it into my foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I have my foundation, and it's modern Arnis. That was the first art I ever did unofficially. My dad had me doing Sinawali empty hand drills and patty kick when I was 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything harkens back to the foundation. So yes, is FMA the duct tape? I think that it is. I will not say every FMA makes every art better, but I
Yeah.
will say most of them do because every art should have a version of grappling, a version of weapon defense. Well, every combat art, which I hate that phrase, I think it's stupid. Um, I almost said every tactical art too, and that almost made me throw up. But every
I could put.
combative art, which that word didn't exist until 1944, but needs to have some sort of weapons defense, some sort of stand up and ground grappling, and some form of striking. If you're going to be a quote unquote combative art,
Mm-hmm.
you know, every sport art does not need weapons defense. You just don't.
Nope.
You don't even need, depending on the sport, you don't need ground or you don't need striking. And I look at Tai Chi as a beautiful example of one who really doesn't need any of those, but Tai Chi's not claiming to be something other than what it is.
Certain
Tai,
elements of it, yeah.
yeah, and not that you could not apply elements of Tai Chi into fighting. What's up, Kevin? Um, you absolutely can because Tai Chi is one of the most sensitivity-based arts on the planet, and the true masters of Tai Chi, you won't even feel them fighting you. You'll just see that you got your ass handed to you,
Yeah.
and especially when you apply those things into the combative arts, the sensitivity principles and whatnot. But like FMA, I would not say is the duct tape. What would I call it though? Because like I think it's just another add-on. Like it's just another tool in the tool belt.
Yeah.
It is, and I think it's one of the best ones, especially for those who wear the tactical belts, because knife defense is primarily. I know there are other countries and other sides of the planet that do knife defense, but and I might be sacrilegious in saying this, but the FMA guys really are the ones who made it simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Because HEMA's got a wide variety of knife stuff, but it wasn't really codified until the nerds got a hold of the transcripts and tried to reinvent the wheel after the fact. So FMA has the unbroken lineage from back in the jungles all the way forward to the modern age. Now,
Well,
yeah.
you did Taekwondo like me as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yep.
we had knife defense.
Yeah.
360 spinning hook kick the knife out of the guy's hand.
Chuck Norris crescent, outside crescent kick. Yes. Yes.
What was the story I heard about some cop who did Taekwondo for 30 plus years and he did that knife defense, that outside crescent kick, 1,004 repetitions a day type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sure as shit is brown. Someone pulled a knife on him and he kicked it out of the guy's hand.
I mean, it's possible. This is the thing. This is, as an aside, I'm of the opinion that these very distinct, unique, and quite honestly obscure martial arts that have a very specific flavor is really based upon the creator of the martial art moved a specific way, had the perfect environment, situation, technique, all those things that made it work for that. And so they have the correct opponent, environment, and situation that they could do that really cool technique. And it worked once. It worked for them once. And as us as students are trying to replicate all those variables further down the line. So I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
I don't think you're wrong. I do have a question though, and I had this instance happen a little while ago. Um, I was watching a thing. I was at a dojo, and a traditional Okinawan karate style was being shown and demonstrated, and he was doing a ground portion.
Mm-hmm.
Guy watching on the sidelines is catch wrestling, BJJ, regular jiu-jitsu. So he's a grappling guy. And he is saying things in the middle of the class that's like, you're going to get someone killed. That's wrong. That's terrible. You're doing it. Blah, 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 blah. First and foremost,
Kick that guy out.
completely unetiquette, improper etiquette to do that while someone's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if he's teaching you how to tie your shoes incorrectly. You don't do that while the guy's teaching on the floor. It's just wrong.
Nope. Yep.
You pull him aside and you talk. But my bigger point is this. The guy that was teaching this, I know for a fact, did some time.
Mm-hmm.
Not military, not law enforcement. You figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I know he did this stuff for real.
Mm-hmm.
So then in that case, are we completely disqualifying it? Or do we qualify it as something that is low percentage success?
Yep.
Just because it works for him doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Granted, this guy's done this for 40 years and did nothing but that. It should work.
You get good at what you practice intentively and have high reps of success with it.
If you do the reps correctly, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in his, I have a student who's also a very good friend of mine who's a HEMA guy, big time.
Mm-hmm.
He's taught me lots of things about the sword fighting world and the fighting world. And we talk about techniques that are high probability success versus low probability success.
Mm-hmm.
That cop who did the outside crescent kick, who got the gun out of the guy's hand, the knife out of the guy's hand, is a medium to low probability success rate. Not saying it's impossible, just saying it's a medium to low probability success rate.
Yep.
Versus what we do, hubud or trapping hands,
Mm-hmm.
gunting, those are more likely to be high probability success rates.
Mm-hmm.
But I will not disqualify anyone's technique if it worked to save their life.
Yeah. Did it work? Did you win? Did you survive? Are you alive? I mean, who can fault that? I think really the bigger issue that I run into is systems down the line when, for one, the creator of that system has been long since passed, and there's a very long gap in between there because of the distance from the original three. I'm going to say the original three generations from that instructor is gone. It's like the telephone game. There's a fair amount of like interpretation and misconception and missed opportunities there because they're trying to figure out what it was that they did through all the stories, the myths, and just the misunderstandings of human mechanics. And so it ends up being with a stylistic approach to a hypothetical situation, but they can't make it work because it's not them. And let alone it's the situation that they cannot replicate, because you can't replicate the chaos of combat. You can get really close to it, but every combat situation is unique in of itself. Now, what keeps things unified is, again, the principles of combat, because we live in a universe constrained by rules, and so there's things like body mechanics and basic physics that unify the systems. Like in the case that the human form really hasn't changed much since we figured out how to destroy it, defend it, and kill it. So until we grow tails and other limbs, we're not really going to have a significant change in our approach to fighting at a principle base. The tools, that's a different story. But when it comes to like the natural weapons of a human, that hasn't changed much.
And I think that I completely agree with this. And my dad learned this from a buddy of his in the military, so I don't know, but he was in the Navy. I'm sure basic military strategies are taught across all boards.
Mm-hmm.
There's three dynamic elements of force, speed, surprise, and balance of action. That's been the same universally. And I would say that there's I think we talked about this, what's the most important thing of target weapon movement.
Mm-hmm.
Has been the same universe since cavemen were fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Before they fought anybody, they had to identify the target.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't start moving and just fight somebody. No, they identified the target, they picked the weapon, and then they moved.
Yep.
Like, and I had a buddy who swears, and he was a military vet too, which is interesting to me. He swears nothing got him more prepared for combat than combat sport.
Yeah.
So he said that's the closest thing to fighting he's ever been to.
Yep.
Even though he saw combat overseas, he said the combat sport prepared him more.
Because the consistency of mindset is really what it is, and the repetition of facing adversity and difficult things.
I was just confused that someone who was outside the wire said that was less combative training than being in the ring, which I was like, interesting. But I'm not a vet. I can't speak to it.
Again, it's that thing about replication of scenario and situation, because, again, combat is chaotic. In the ring, in the cage, on a sports setup, you can replicate things fairly easily because it's constrained by rules, and it's a standardized approach to things. With combat, there's some standardization of the approach, like L ambushes work, near and far ambushes work, gain fire superiority to allow for mobility and positioning, but that's done by maximum command and control, so you need to be able to shoot, move, and communicate, but you achieve that with positive fight space management, and taking the initiative. So those are the rules. Now, whether or not the combat situation is going to be the same, like, you never know. Are you in an elevated position? Are you taking fire from 2 elevated positions? Are you dealing with a far near? There's so many different variables that you can get into. Which
is why combat is ever fluctuating.
It is. And this is where, again, combat is chaos. And what I say often is that despite our preparation, despite our intent, despite our experience, the universe and the enemy have a bigger say in the combat situation than you do. Because often, from a sense of morality, and our position of morality as martial artists, as people who are justifiable in our use of force, it's often reactionary, especially in the civilian side. Preemption is really tricky, especially dealing with the legal sense as a citizen not sworn by oath and badge to utilize violence to the point of lethality. But as an average citizen, our dealings with violence is often reactionary. And so with that means the enemy and the universe really determines when that fight's going to happen, when the intention of they're taking the initiative, and again, we're responding to a situation. Now, situational awareness and fight sense, all those things will help mitigate that reactionary response, but often enough, for the majority of the time, as an average citizen in violence, we have to respond to the violence versus because the issue of preemption. Because if we see a threat and we neutralize it, there's that legal, social fight that we're going to win, and often we'll lose. So
you can't just shoot the guy because look at you funny.
No, it's not the Wild West anymore.
Damn, I wish it was sometimes.
I like indoor plumbing, so
that's a fair point.
And I like antibiotics, and I like good social, good social politics. And
I just think it'd be cool as hell to have the old Western scene where they walk into the bar and everyone stops, looks at the guy, and goes back to doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, like, back to like what this has kind of turned into is FMA is the duct tape of martial arts, yes or no? The thing that I really go back to is where it is the negative side of duct tape is when FMA practitioners and instructors try to say that they can do it all within the scope of its FMA, like firearms related stuff. Because honestly, and when it comes to the presentation of FMA as it has been, especially the past 60 years, we're a stick art and we're a knife art and medium to long blade art. Those are like our primary features that we put out. Then you put some striking and some dirty boxing into it and some trapping. That's really how FMA is presented. We don't really have the highly developed kicking system. I mean, Sikaran is one thing, but that's really not what we really tout. We tout sharp, pointy things, blunt, smacky things, and some dirty boxing.
I agree with that.
Which is funny, which is interesting, because when you go back to like the originality of the Philippines, our tribal beginnings, it was warfare driven. Talk about a combat art that comes from warfare. They use spears. They use shields. They fought in pairs and coordinated attacks. There was duels on the field to a point, but I'm finding, and this is just my observation, that the presentation of FMA in the modern sense is from the dueling aspect, not from the war fighting aspect. Because when you're using war fighting in formation or just with combined arms, you're doing it as a team structure with your buddies working the flank and you're engaging at the front. And they're using spears, they're using shields, and not just dueling with a stick.
Well, and I agree. I'm going to look up something real quick because I'm interested in what pops up when I do this. Let's see here, because you bring up a very interesting point. Let's see. All right, so I looked up. Let's see what pops up. Come on, images. The first image that pops up, and you said that FMA is primarily focused on stick blunt objects and short to mid-long pointy things.
Mm-hmm.
That's rough about it. The first thing that pops up when I typed in Lapu Lapu
Mm-hmm.
is a shield and a longsword.
Mm-hmm.
Almost no FMA system that I can think of immediately, even some time to figure it out, uses those weapons.
Yeah.
So
think about this guy. But yeah, you're saying, sorry.
No, but that's a great point. Like, if we're teaching traditional Filipino combatives, why aren't people using shields more?
Yeah.
Why aren't people using full-size compilans or full-size panabasas?
Yeah.
Because, the Filipino arts, and this is where I got in trouble before, where I say, hey, there's, combative is a misnomer. I don't like the word combative and I don't think people should teach combatives unless they themselves have seen combat or have had the experience. But
yeah.
my definition of combat and combatives, besides the point. But I was with a group who, this dude was funny. He's sitting in the middle of a beach circle with his, the chieftain stance,
Mm-hmm.
and sitting there going, ours is the true Filipino combative art. Ours is the true killing art. Ours is this. Ours is that. And I'm like, I know your lineage. You're off someone else's. So yours has only been around for 15 years. How do you know what the true killing art of Filipinos were?
And this is actually going back with historical record, because I'm going to pull up a couple images here that we see consistently in the myths of FMA and the lineages they are in, and just the narrative that keeps popping up is like Lapu Lapu, for example, Great Visayan chieftain. Everybody keeps coming back to, this is not just Lapu Lapu, but this is a reenactment, a photo from the Battle of Mactalan. Okay, Campilians, calcite shields, a bunch of brown dudes, long hair, and fighting in formations. There could be individual duels, yes, but the reality is they're going to fight in formation. They're going to fight as a unit, because even looking like this guy, okay, Sulu warrior from the Moro lands. Yeah, there is some individual dueling, but armor, to get past armor, you got to use tactics. Just the same with these guys. The Kratos. You have that.
The freaking Vikings were not solo fighters.
Yeah. So
there's been any great fighting tribe or any great fighting group that was a one-on-one based fighting.
Yeah, there's the romanticism that we find on the individual duelist, whether it is the musketeer, the samurai, the Filipino duelist. There's just that.
The Alamo.
Yeah, the Alamo. This romantic idea that we're going to be the mythical guy, the mythical gal. And we try to embody that or just put ourselves in that mind space, because that is the narrative that we're trying to put forth, because the justification, the admiration, and just the end-all pursuit, we're trying to live up to that. And I think a lot of FMA systems try to resemble that, because there's a tie to our ethnic history and heritage and pride in therein, and talk about the mindset of resistance against colonization and all these things. But when it comes down to it, like the basis of warfare is it's not dueling. It's unit based, small unit tactics leading into a larger strategic approach to fighting. Specifically, teams, larger teams, bigger teams, nation states, etc. It's not just one guy. If you're fighting alone, and this is using an axiom from my military days, if you're fighting alone, you fucked up. Just did. So, but FMA in the modern sense, we keep again this romantic idea that we're going to be a duelist. The single guy, single gal is going to take it on because that's the way we train it. This is directly tied to the way we train.
It sounds pretty that way,
Yeah.
Like, I was just thinking about this. Like, think of it as if the American Revolution was won because George Washington got into a 10 paces duel with King Henry or King George, whatever his name was. The story of our history as a country would be completely different.
Absolutely.
Instead, nope, it was the American Revolution, the freedom fighters, plural, against the oppressive opposing armies.
Yep.
Army, plural. It's just how it was. There was no such thing as, I don't think any great nation was won on a one-on-one base.
No. Again, that's a myth, which is a beautiful myth of like two warriors meet on the field in representation.
Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker is a beautiful fight.
Yeah, it is. We don't get to see it because the way choreography was back in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. But point being is the way we train, the way we teach is on a one-to-one basis, and it encourages dueling. But if we're going to talk about war fighting arts, combatives is done in mass, in teams, not as a duel. And this is where I find, again, going back to is FMA's duct tape. We try to tie everything together loosely, but we're not actually putting some real thought into what is actually there. And that solid base of the basic understanding is that are we teaching FMA from a dueling perspective or are we teaching from an actual war fighting perspective? Because we're doing from war fighting, you need to have homies with, you need an organization. You need not organization like memberships. You need like organizational structure to combat. You need teams and you need squads. You need small unit tactics. So,
and this, they're very blessed to have multiple friends in military and law enforcement, and they're all telling the same thing. Like, no cop, especially in law enforcement. If you're a cop and you're alone in a hostile situation, you fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have no idea what's on the other side of that door.
Yep.
If you're in the military situation, you're outside the line, I'm assuming that if you're going out there, it's already understood some shit's going to pop off.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, this is where civilian military law enforcement. Civilians were trained virtually to do it solo.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trained to fight as a small unit. We're not trained to fight as a militia. Which I think that could be why the FMA systems started romanticizing and blending it towards the solo aspect, because most civilians are not going to fight side by side with their brothers.
No.
They're just not.
Because there's no tribal learning, for one.
Cops, they're taught small unit tactics loosely. Military, I'm sure when you were there, you were taught multiple variations of small unit tactics and even greater unit tactics. I don't know. But civilians, they're not taught that way. No,
because it's not their job, for one. Because our societal structure is as such. We outsource our security to a small sector of the population that has the righteous justification to utilize force up to a point of lethality. That is the modern system. Say again?
Did you make that up, or is that written somewhere? That's really well put.
I'm assuming it's written somewhere, but that rattles out of my brain hole all the time because it's part of the doctrine that I teach.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah. But here's the other part about this. So I use it as a triangle. So on the other side of the triangle, the threshold, is that when everybody had to be responsible for their safety, their security, and the protection, such as like living on the frontier, whether it's the American frontier or anywhere else, everybody was trained on how to be self-sustainable, that whether it is farming or fighting, because Talk about the 3 F's here in society. Humans are really good at 3 things: fucking, fighting, and feeding ourselves. But to be able to do the other 2, we have to be good at the fighting part. So that's that the individual responsibility of people. They had to take on that accountability of protect themselves, feed themselves. Now, as society grew and to a larger unified structure, this is where not everybody was responsible for it. Now, in some cases, in the tribal setting, yes, but when we're leading into the modern day, 2024, not everybody's responsible for their personal protection and safety. We've outsourced that to elements of our society because it's there. We've not given up that right, but we've given them that responsibility and that trust to uphold the law for our benefit and safety up to the point of lethality, because the average person just doesn't want to do it, for one. So we as a society make other people do it or allow other people to do it. So and that's directly tied to the urbanization of our overall species. So
it's a really interesting study of thought when you go into that realm of like, and especially going back to the idea that you were saying of why arts were created and the circumstances in which they were created, which I'll harken back to modern Arnis. People have given modern Arnis some flack when, well, are there any, this is going to get me in some trouble prior to modern Arnis. Well, I don't consider modern Arnis the commercialized bare version, bare bones of modern Arnis to be a fighting art. I don't.
Yeah.
Because I have a good understanding of what Professor wanted to do. Because of what I've heard. Professor didn't care about creating fighters.
No.
He just didn't. Because he knew that wasn't where the money was at the time. At the time, it was, how do I make 400 karate participants at a seminar want to come back?
Yeah.
Well, let's make it entertaining. Let's make it fun. Let's make it flashy.
Yeah.
You know? Now, are there fighters in modern Arnis? Hell yeah. My dad was one of them. Dougie Pierre, Tattoo, Andrew Florida. You know.
Tatsu-Kali. Yeah.
What was that?
Tatsu-Kali.
Yeah. Funny thing was, Dr. Kelly was a fighter long before he met Remy.
It's true. That is very true.
I wouldn't fight Dr. Kelly now.
Oh, man.
But, like, I don't think Remy cared about creating a fighting art. He cared about making an art that was easy to do, easy to teach, easy to replicate, and easy to promote for seminar purposes. Now, were his private students fighters? A handful of them were, a number of them were. The names we just listed. Remy didn't care. So that's why when I look at modern Arnis, people say, oh, I learn how to fight, let's learn modern Arnis. I'm like, well, I can teach you how to fight, but it's not going to be off of the basic curriculum of modern Arnis. We're not going to teach you how to fight. Now, does
fighting need a marketable name?
It's a great question.
Because if we're just going to talk about fighting is the skillful application of violence, tact, and tactics. It doesn't.
There are a lot of martial arts that claim to be fighting arts that are not fighting arts.
Yeah, because they have that cultural overlay, which leads to my other question. I'm hijacking this, but my other question is for FMA in general and our fellow practitioners out there. What is more important for FMA? To continue and spread the art, or to produce fighters within the art? This is a trick question.
Oh, I had an answer too.
Well, go for it. Because this is a general question that I'm consistently asking myself, and I jokingly ask in general with my little whimsy of, is it FMA? But my questions in general are, what's more important? Propagation of the art and spreading it to the world, or producing fighters within it?
Then I will ask this question. What is more important, and you are a Filipino, you are Pinoy, what is more important to the culture, the fighting or the community?
The chicken and the egg situation, because the fighting creates and allows for the community to grow and be a thing. Because again, or let's utilize the American approach, free speech. Okay. Free speech comes at the behest of violence. Every revolution, every democracy, every republic, every ideal of being free comes at the behest of violence. Now, to maintain those freedoms, we have to be capable and willing and have to, in some cases, engage in violence, physical violence, not words or violence, but physical violence to maintain those rights, those liberties, and those freedoms. So going back to culture, fighting is intrinsically part of the development and safety and security of culture. But it's not the only thing that matters. It just sets the foundation to allow for culture to thrive. Now, here's the other part about that. For culture to thrive with violence as the base, violence develops within the culture. This is where you see systematized approaches to violence, ergo martial arts systems, academies of violence and thought and fighting methodologies that have the cultural overlay to it. So it keeps layering upon itself. So one is not more important than the other, but one is but they're both requisite for each other to exist.
Yes, and I hear that, but what I was alluding more towards was when you were asking about what's going to benefit the FMA community. What is this? Paul.
Yeah.
We have a legit fighting format, kind of, let's say, like one championship. Yeah, but people are trying to do that.
It would be cool. I'm all down for it.
I don't think FMA sport combat will ever work, in the sense that I don't think you'll get everyone to agree on the rules.
Yeah.
Because every FMA system has their own. Modern Arnis, great example. We go lefty. Some systems I've worked with, I flowed with them, switch lefty. They said, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Well,
but back to your point about culture and
the culture versus the fighting part of it. On you, it's like, what's more important, the sharing and propagating of the art versus creating fighters? And you say the trick question. My response question was alluding to: are we trying to promote the Filipino? From what I understand, Filipino culture is really non-conflict, but confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
Filipinos don't like conflict. We're just very good. You guys are just very good at it. Like, I've talked to so many people who are Filipino who say, yeah, I do not like violence, but they do Filipino martial arts. Yeah. So do we really care if they're fighting? Because inherently, it seems to me, and again, I'm not Filipino, it seems more to me that most Filipino people do not like violence. They'd rather sit around a fire, share stories, do the dancing, do things like that, just like enjoying the community and the family aspect of it. So that's where, for me, I think it's more important to propagate the art and to share and spread the art. I do not care if we have more quote-unquote fighters, because in reality, it's just not that important to me. Now, granted, as someone who likes fighting, I love it. Fun, and it's a great way to pass the time, but like, for people to sit there and say, oh yeah, ours is the true killing art, you're not using the stick in the right or the left hand. You have the stick up your ass. Relax. Have fun. We've talked about that at length, Rubber Chicken Man.
Yeah. Yes, we have. So fighting is the foundation. Okay. Fighting is the foundation to allow for us to spread the art, because without the fighting part, there's nothing to spread. Now, if we're saying we're spreading culture, which we do that anyways with food, dance, music, all these things. But if we're talking about lumpia. Lumpia is love language, as is lechon. So the fact is, if we're spreading the art of Filipino martial arts, then it comes it is required for the fighting to be the foundation, because there's nothing to share about fighting if there was no fighters that survived to continue on with that tradition and lineage. And this is where that question is it the propagation of the art or the fighting? And I'm of the argument that fighting is the thing that started and the thing that we're sharing, but it changes in the perspective from person to person, because that's that question of why we fight, and that reason, that answer changes and evolves over time based upon our preferences, our body composition, just where we are at life. Like in my case, I don't need to fight in FMA. I don't need to fight in combat sports or in warfare. That's not my primary goal at the end of things. Now, I will if I have to, but it's not my primary pursuit, especially with FMA. I'm not intending to fight with FMA. I'm intending to share and express my art, to connect with my culture, to share and express that to my children and teach those traditions with the basic understanding that, yes, fighting is a foundational principle of of human existence, but it's not the most important thing, because it leads into this issue about conditional love, identity evaluation situations, and this whole idea that we're only worth our capability to fight. So because it's not the case that we need anymore, because we're not living on the frontier. We're not fighting things with sharp pointy teeth or rotting marauders. Marauders like in previous generations, especially here in the West. So it gives me the opportunity to do propagation of the art and respect and gratitude for the fighting aspect, but that's not the most important thing for me. And I think for FMA in general, because it's been proven, it continues to prove that elements of FMA is fully functional in a fighting situation. Again, the battle-tested lineage has been proven in many, many things, in many, many instances. But it is not necessarily the most important thing in the modern perspective for us to grow the art, to grow the exposure of the art. So
I completely agree, and I didn't even think of it that way. What is Coach Dennison? Probably the Francis for the government not to.
Yeah, I agree.
But I also agree with what you're saying of like the fighting came first.
Mm-hmm.
It had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What does Google Paul say? We do like violence nowadays, though they become watchers versus participants. Violence is everywhere. I think separating from the areas in us in regards to violence are different.
Absolutely.
Perspective. I don't know.
I don't. I agree in tone. It's regionality based, because
Absolutely.
I don't need to use FMA here in Homer, Alaska, because Homer, Alaska is a fairly safe place, and I also have access to firearms. So there's that. But say like, but I put it being is at scale and population, it's a relatively safe community. It's why we chose to live here and raise our kids here. It's safer than most places, unlike Texas and where I grew up in Southern California, especially dealing with all the gang shit that I was involved with. Yeah, I needed to know how to fight because that's the community I was in. That's the community that I engaged with and participated in. So I had to be able to fight because violence was a currency. Straight up was. I don't live there anymore for many, many reasons particular to that. So the perspective of the use of violence and fighting efficacy and capability is lessened up here versus down there. Yeah. Been here for 14 years.
Come on, Paul. So, fighting being the origin, the art being the lasting impression. What does propagating the art look like as duct tape? Ooh, Kevin.
That's a good question. I'll let you start, and then I'll throw my 2 cents in there.
Can you leave the question up there again so I can read it one more time?
Yeah.
Kevin, I'm going to text you later to yell at you for this question. Making me think. Probably.
Brain food is good. I enjoy it.
So, I would go with this. What's the first thing you teach someone who's day one student? You don't teach them fighting. You teach them fighting towards the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the last thing the guy does towards the end of his time as martial artist? He didn't fight anymore. So that's where I think that fighting is the midway. And I look at the greats as my examples, GM Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't fight anymore. He didn't have to.
No.
He did his time.
Mm-hmm.
But then he didn't do any in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do any. He did a whole lot. He didn't do any more.
Yep.
So there was 2 instances where fighting was not the focus.
Yep.
Versus the 1 instance where it was the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think that, and that's true in any martial arts, really. It's like in Taekwondo, you don't start sparring until 3 months in, roughly. Unfortunately, it's maybe 3 months to 6 months, and then you'll do it, and then eventually you'll stop doing it because you just can't. We used to hold tournaments for the seniors division. They're 75 years old. They ain't sparring. So when it comes to how is it the duct tape, FMA is the one system that I believe that you're going to fight, and you're going to fight like you mean it, and then you're going to stop.
Yep.
Like, nothing against jiu-jitsu grappling, nothing against boxing, nothing against MMA, cage fighting. Those guys fight like you mean it too. But there is a whole different dynamic when someone is swinging an item at your head at full speed.
Yep.
There is a different dynamic, not saying better or worse, because being punched in the face sucks. But when someone is swinging a stick at your head with the intent to cave your skull in, it's just a different ballgame.
Yep.
As someone who's been in the ring and as someone who's been in stick fights with Dog Brothers, it's just a different dynamic. I've learned from both, and they're both incredibly beneficial. And that's where the fighting is important. But the propagation of the art, in my opinion, is the true duct tape.
Yep.
The culture of the art is what holds everything together.
Yep.
Fighting is established, and it helped to become it. So I'm losing the duct tape metaphor. You go.
So, fighting being the origin and being the lasting, and art being the lasting impression, what does propagating the art look as duct tape? It's very simple. When you got a bunch of systems saying that they can utilize all their fighting method, or they actually no, let me go back. When you have systems that are trying to be many things, but are mediocre at those many things, instead of having the realistic understanding that they can't be everything. Such in the case, firearms. The modern usage of firearms in the tactical sense. Okay, there's far better schools of thought with utilizing firearms in a combat situation that FMA does not have the breadth of experience to teach that. Now, you got people who are FMA practitioners who are also extremely talented and skillful and experienced gunfighters, but I will argue that they learned to gunfight, and their experiences specifically to gunfighting was through gunfighting, not FMA as a lens. So when you have people who say that they're a blade art and then they're a gunfighting art, it's just like it doesn't make sense. Because I'll put it to the American infantry schools, okay? But they don't teach knife stuff because that's not their job. Their job is to use firearms and a multitude of tactics to win in the fight space, okay? Knife work is so limited because that's not the focus. The focus is to use the firearm. Now, they can use some knife stuff in there. They do teach a little bit, but the fact is, if it's the tool specific to the situation and the engagement of likelihood with the said tools, such as gunfights, fighting other guns, or people with guns, then the focus is teaching the proper skills, tactics, and methodologies to gunfighting. Where you have FMA trying to be duct tape into realms it's really not their forte and not their experience and not their responsibility, that is where the duct tape part is really problematic. So, and it depends upon the person. So, as FMA as it's been presented in the community in the past 60 to 80 years, is we're stick art and we're a knife art and we're a sword art. We're not a gunfighting art. We just aren't. And people who say they are, I have questions.
Full of shit.
Yeah, I have questions. So hopefully that answers your question there, Kevin. The fact is, when fighting isn't the...
Fuck, Kevin, that's what it is.
It's a good question, but when fighting is not the priority, this is where art has the opportunity. The problem being is that at the core, regardless of what it is, when you have art and then you have fighters can do art. I have a hard time in a lot of cases where art, purely artistic expression, says that they can fight, because if they don't fight, then they're not fighters. So it's tricky that stumbles on that, but the fact is, one is definitely one and can be the other. There is some opportunity, but if your primary focus is fighting, you're going to be good at that versus artistic expression and cultural expression.
I've seen a difference, honestly, though. Like, I've seen art people have it depends on the person. I tend to students start fighting and end up fighting. Age and education.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with
And
that.
that's where like I've seen more people, at least in my own personal experience as a teacher. I've had better fighters come out of the arts side of things
Yep.
than like the guys who were there to learn the art became better fighters than the guys who only did fighting understand the art.
Yep.
So I do think that you're right. It is a fluctuating dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's constantly on a tilt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I do think that there's pros and cons to both obviously. Like,
I'll just put it this way: we've seen the videos online about obscure traditional martial artist fights a professional or even amateur combat sports athlete and
absolutely,
gets their ass
they're
handed
handed to them, no doubt.
because the focus on either the fighter's focus is fighting, the traditionalist is traditional martial arts that dabbles, but
Agreed.
yeah.
But that's where I think like if the traditional and this is if the traditional martial arts have been given time to prepare for a fight,
Mm-hmm.
or he could change his focus,
Mm-hmm.
I think he would have a better chance and quite possibly win because he already had the mindset and the ability to focus
Mm-hmm.
on one aspect, which means he can clearly demonstrate he can focus on another aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when I've worked with some fighting guys, they like I remember in Taekwondo, like they refused to learn forms because they couldn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't making sense because I don't want that stuff to cloud my brain when I'm in the ring. I'm like, if doing a kata clouds your brain while you're in the ring, I think
That,
you're a little too wound up.
that's an issue about bandwidth.
Yeah, you're a little wound tight for that, buddy. But
Yeah. And really, what this boils down to is fighting is simple, but it's not easy, and we overcomplicate it because of method and preferences.
kick
So,
him in the nuts, headbutt him.
yep, yep. Oh well. We got about I mean, Chris, you wanted to keep this shorter today. We got about 15 minutes. We have a couple other questions coming in.
Let's
Let's
do it.
see.
15 minutes. Why not?
Yeah, yeah. Become fighters usually have far better. Yeah, because the focus
Yeah,
is there, the intention is there, the intention to be skillful at violence and have the methodology and the means to enact that goal, absolutely, and
and I
the
think
reps.
longevity wise, that's correct. But like what you're saying is, you put a fresh fighter in the ring with a fresh arts guy. Fresh fighter's going to beat the shit out of the fresh arts guy every day
Yep,
until the arts guy changes his focus.
that's true. And also, you need to get punched really to know fighting, absolutely, because there's again, this boils back to theoreticism and practical application.
Absolutely.
Both begats the other, just like culture and warfare begats the other, and it's directly intrinsic to each other. So, again, it depends. It really just depends. Um, so yeah, this has been great. Chris, do you have anything particular that you want to put out that's coming up in the near future? Because like this was a very like ad hoc. Hey, let's just jump on and do the
Let's
shit.
do it, yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh, that's okay, Paul. You're allowed to be late. Seminars coming up. Chad, if you're in Florida and you're in Arcadia, Florida, February 2nd, Chad Binn's winter camp. My dad will be there. It's amazing. Also, the Chris Chiu, CHRISCHOO __ is no longer active.
oh sweet.
And I can't get rid of it. I don't know how. So,
I will do that.
yeah,
And then
follow the Nomad Arnis page. That's my main one. And the Chris Chiu, CRISCHW page is one of my other ones. Yeah, I got hacked, dude. It's a bunch of nonsense.
yeah, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for that to happen.
Some Russian bot happened to found me when I was in my lowest point in life. You know.
Yep. Hey,
Um,
Marquise.
woo.
What's up, homie?
My dad is a seminar in Clearwater, Florida, February 25th. Be an awesome time then, as always, in Clearwater. Hit me up. There's more things, as always, I want to promote, but I can't think of anything else immediately.
I mean, if you ever think about it and have posters, I'm more than happy to put it out on my channel and everything else. So,
I want everyone on here to subscribe to this YouTube page
yeah,
because I think Coach Kurt does an amazing job. And I think as someone who is not the most vocal about himself, you guys should be aware of who Coach Kurt is. Like,
thank you.
no, and I'm serious, brother. Like you've done so. We met over a forum, and you've become one of my closest martial arts friends in the past year.
Yeah.
And I've had some people for the past 15.
Yep.
You know, because we're two genuine people who just want to talk about truth.
Yep.
You know, you don't try to pull rank, you don't try to do, and with anyone who, you're skilled. Like, I've seen your movements, obviously. You could talk way more shit than you do, but you don't. You're a humble guy. So, my respects to you, my friend.
Thank you, homie. Yeah.
And I don't kiss ass, people. You know that.
I mean, really what it boils down to is, I mean, I've had an interesting life, as many other people have, and I've had some very interesting experiences, which has led to a point of where I'm at today. What is really different as to who I am today versus who I was back when is I've aged and I've matured and I've recalibrated a few things because I've been forced to, and to continue on doing the things that I love, I've had to change my mindset. And part of that is I just don't act like an asshole intentionally. I just don't want to be one because I've been there, done that. I don't need to continuously prove my fighting prowess because honestly, who really cares? The only people that care is me, my children, and my wife. Anybody else, it doesn't really matter because my fighting capability, my prowess and experience only comes to real importance is when it matters. Because like online egos and fighting in the ring in the cage, that really doesn't serve like the practicality of me defending me and my own. So this is where I much prefer to be somebody who asks questions, somebody pokes a little bit, pecks a little bit with the rubber chicken, because I don't need to prove my capabilities to the people out there. Because the fact is, it's not theirs to really it's not theirs to question. Because am I defending them? Am I going to protect them? No, I'm going to protect my wife and my children. I'm going to protect myself. So I don't need to. Yeah, I don't need to prove what I can do because movement should speak for itself. And more importantly, what I should be able to prove and what's most important for me is my brain. What I can provide for the community, aside from my sarcasm and my rubber chickens, is I want to provide my brain. And the way I provide my brain is I ask questions. And I give a platform and an opportunity for people to come answer and also ask more questions. So what this boils down to is a plug. If anybody wants to come on here and have a cool conversation with me and ask questions, come do it. Reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have you on here. More than happy to have a discussion. May lead to an argument, but it doesn't really matter. I'm happy to have people come hang out with me and we can talk about cool shit because it's really the conversations with people that matter to me. So I don't know. There's a long little plug and rant.
Why do you keep having me on? I guess because you like talking to me.
Well, like I said, we're homies. We have this awesome little bromance going on. So,
cool.
Yeah. But with all that being said, my only little bit of business to put out there is I'm shifting gears a wee bit because I'm going back to school, trying to finish my master's degree. So I'm like slowing down, but like reformatting things. So what is happening business wise is I am uploading things up to Spotify. So if you're on here and you're around, find me on Spotify because I'm uploading all the podcast episodes there. And yeah, you can listen to me and my guest pontificate there. So, yeah.
Well, Kurt, I just want to say thanks again for having me on. I love the spur of the moment stuff. If you ever need a spur of the moment guest, hit me up. We'll do it again.
Yeah, man.
Stable internet.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on stable internet in your own space. So yeah, it's good stuff. Well, Chris, like always, thank you for everything. Everybody, thank you as well. Thank you for the gift of your time. And I will drop you down, say our outro, and yeah, we'll have a good afternoon. Everybody. You too. Let me hit the buttons because I'm gonna have to edit this. Here we go. Hit the button.